I just got back from COP29 in Baku, Azerbaijan. And wow, what an experience! For those of you who might not know, COP stands for Conference of the Parties, and it's basically the annual meeting where countries come together to discuss climate change, share progress, and, let's be honest, sometimes argue about who's doing what and how fast. This was my first time attending, and let me tell you, it was a whirlwind of emotions, insights, and a whole lot of coffee. Walking into the venue was like stepping into a different world. You see flags from every nation, representatives in their sharp suits, and the buzz of conversations about climate policies, emissions reductions, and sustainable development goals. It's a bit overwhelming at first. I mean, here I was, just a regular person passionate about the environment, surrounded by diplomats and scientists who have dedicated their lives to this cause. But you know what? That's the beauty of COP. It's a melting pot of ideas, cultures, and perspectives, all focused on one urgent issue, our planet. One thing that struck me immediately was the diversity of voices. There were activists, indigenous leaders, and youth representatives alongside government officials. It was refreshing to see so many people advocating for climate justice, sharing stories from their communities, and pushing for action that goes beyond mere words. I attended a panel discussion featuring young climate activists, and their passion was contagious. They spoke about the urgency of the climate crisis, the impact it has on their futures, and how they refuse to be sidelined. It was a reminder that this isn't just a political issue, it's a human issue. Now, let's talk about the negotiations. I had the chance to sit in on a few sessions, and let me tell you, it's like watching a high-stakes chess game. Delegates from different countries are strategizing, negotiating, and sometimes even bargaining. Everyone has their own interests, and it can get pretty heated. One moment you're hearing about ambitious goals to cut carbon emissions, and the next, you're witnessing a country pushing back, citing economic concerns or energy needs. It's a complex dance, and it can be frustrating to see how slow the process can be. But then again, change takes time, especially when you're dealing with so many different stakeholders. One of the highlights for me was the focus on technology and innovation. There were exhibitions showcasing cutting-edge solutions for renewable energy, carbon capture, and sustainable agriculture. It was like a glimpse into the future, a world where we can harness technology to combat climate change. I spoke to a few entrepreneurs who are developing apps to help people track their carbon footprints or platforms that connect consumers with local sustainable businesses. It was inspiring to see how creativity and innovation can play a role in addressing this crisis. And honestly, it made me feel hopeful. The younger generation is not just talking about change, they're actively creating it. But let's not sugarcoat everything. There were moments of frustration. I attended a session on loss and damage, which is a term used to describe the impacts of climate change that can't be avoided. It's heartbreaking to hear stories from communities that have already been devastated by extreme weather events. They're not just statistics, they're real people with real lives, and yet the discussions often felt too abstract. It's easy for policymakers to talk about numbers and targets, but those numbers represent lives, livelihoods, and cultures that are at risk. It's a stark reminder that behind every statistic is a story that needs to be heard. And then there's the issue of commitment. Every year, countries make promises, but how many of those promises actually translate into action? I heard a lot of talk about net zero targets and ambitious climate plans, but I couldn't help but wonder how many of these countries will follow through. It's a critical question, and one that I think we all need to keep asking. Accountability is key, and as citizens, we must hold our leaders responsible for their commitments. It's not just about what happens in the conference halls, it's about what happens back home in our communities. As I wandered through the different pavilions, I found myself drawn to the stories of resilience. There were displays showcasing how communities are adapting to climate impacts, from innovative farming techniques to community-led conservation efforts. These are the unsung heroes of the climate crisis, and their stories deserve to be amplified. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by the scale of the problem, But these grassroots efforts remind us that change is possible, and it often starts at the local level. I also had the chance to connect with some incredible people. I met a woman from a small island nation who shared her experiences of rising sea levels and displacement. Her determination to fight for her community's future was both humbling and inspiring. It was a powerful reminder that climate change is not just an abstract concept, it's a reality that people are facing every day. These connections made the experience more personal and reminded me of why I'm passionate about this issue. As I reflect on my time at COP29, I realize that it's not just about the negotiations or the panels. It's about the conversations we have, the connections we make, and the collective action we can take. It's a reminder that we're all in this together, and every voice matters. Whether you're a policymaker, a scientist, an activist, or just someone who cares about the planet, your contributions are vital. So, what's next? For me, it's about taking what I learned and sharing it with others. It's about continuing to advocate for change in my community and holding leaders accountable. COP29 was just the beginning of a much larger conversation, and I'm excited to be a part of it. Together, we can push for the action our planet so desperately needs. Let's keep the momentum going, because the time for talk is over. It's time for action.